Welcome to the Elokus podcast. This is class number 21 in the discourse Vaidabe Moshe Roshei Hamatos, which is the 10th discourse in the overall book, Bishash Egdimu 5672. And this is class number 6 in chapter 40. We're almost concluding. I think next class is going to be the final class in this discourse, finishing 10 discourses and on to the 11th. Okay, here we are. So in last class, we were learning how the proper way of eating is to access and to be focused only on the spiritual and godly potential that's in the food, and all the physical pleasure and delight should not be in our mind, but the preoccupation is in the spark of God that's there, which translates out to the spiritual benefit we get from the food. And although it probably would be almost impossible to not enjoy physical delight, but again, when one is, as we discussed in last class, when one is very, very driven with something, like we discussed, a business meeting, even though it's over fine food, one doesn't even taste the food because your mind is not there. Your mind is elsewhere. And that's the correct way of eating during the week, generally because one has to separate the good from the bad that's in the food. That's what we were learning in last class. And but we mentioned that there is a higher form of eating, which is a Shabbos form of eating, where there, even the physical pleasure is embraced and becomes part of the holy experience. That's what we're going to learn today. And we're going to lead this into explaining the concept of why one would take a vow and then how one annuls a vow. And this all has to do with what we're learning in the discourse, that the experience of Chachma is a completely otherworldly experience than the experience of Bina, which will be impactful in this discussion. It will become, as we will see. Okay, so here we're holding, in which we said that the regular form of eating is to reject the physical pleasure and to focus in only on the spirituality of the food, which is the godly potential, and that's how we refine the world, separate good from bad. Holding over here. However, again, this is like the middle of chapter 40 in the second paragraph, about 1/3 into the second paragraph, chapter 40. There is a manner that even the lower part of Noga becomes integrated in holiness. That means that one can dip lower into the food and pick up not only the higher point of the food, which is purely the energy of the food, but one is able to go down lower and reach into the actual more material side of the food and elevate that as well. He refers to that very interesting lashon that even the ra of Noga gets elevated. That means that even what would generally during the weekday be considered the evil side of the Noga, the negative side of the Noga, what we're really saying is that in every item of food, the upper part of it is holy, not holy, is tov, is good, and we can make it holy by pulling at it, by being a magnet to that spark. And how is that? Through our interest in that spark, our mindfulness in that spark. We're coming to the food and we're seeking the godly benefits from the food. Then we are communicating with the higher soul of that food. But the other side of the food, which is the more material element of it, which involves the physical properties of it, including the pleasure that's in the food, must be dismissed, and we cannot elevate that, we can't integrate it. So we kind of ignore it in the eating process that we have usually. However, he says there's a type of engagement with food where even the lower part of the food, which means even the bottom half of the food, which is the more physical properties, including the pleasure of the food, becomes part of the holy experience. Nichlal b'kedusha gets absorbed in holiness. Kamoy b'Shabbos, like on Shabbos. Shamar Azal, the sages say, mitzvah la'angoy, it's a mitzvah to delight in Shabbos, to make Shabbos a delightful day, ba'achila v'shtiyah, through eating and drinking. What does that mean? What do you mean that you're supposed to delight in Shabbos through eating and drinking? That means that the person is eating. What does eating and drinking have to do with the light of Shabbos? The answer is that by getting pleasure from the eating and the drinking, that pleasure becomes a Shabbos pleasure. It's the delight of Shabbos through the eating and drinking. Because if it would mean just delighting in Shabbos because it's Shabbos, then why are you mixing in food over here? It's because you're delighting in the Shabbos through the food and the drink, which means you have to seek the pleasure of the food. For who? What does that mean? Is in a level of holiness on Shabbos. And the reason for that is because on Shabbos, the nature of the food changes. The physical properties of the food, the physical property, which include the pleasure that it's not what it was yet. It's not, meaning God is visible in that physical pleasure. And that's why you can access the physical pleasure and not become distracted from Hashem, but you're within the physical pleasure, you're in the divine zone. It's not physical, it's not a physical delight. While you're enjoying that delightful food on Shabbos, that delight is like a divine delight. It's like you're taking pleasure in God. Because what does that mean? Simple words. God expands in the world on Shabbos. So the tier of this world, where God is usually not visibly present in an open way, but God is more trapped. That's what the klippas are. God is everywhere, but he's trapped over there. He's not manifest and revealed. On Shabbos, God's territory expands. God's presence expands to include the lower tiers of this world in which he manifests in them as well. And therefore, when one interacts with the material world and the lower part of the physical world on Shabbos, you're not outside of the divine experience, you're actually still within. There is an expansion of the territory of God. It's like, look at a field. A field is surrounded by a gate, by a fence. It's fenced off. And imagine that once a week, this fence broadens and includes areas that usually are outside of the fence. Now they're included in the fence. And that's the idea over here. What's included in Rishus HaYachid, in the private domain of God, includes also what is yesterday, during the week, the public domain. The private domain expands. So let's understand this a little better. Over here, he doesn't go into it that much, but there is a fascinating piece in Derech Mitzvah Sechel from the Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek is the third Chabad Rebbe, and he is the grandfather of the author of what we're learning here. And he says that he had a discussion with his grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, just a few short days before the Alter Rebbe passed away from the world. When the Alter Rebbe was in the village called Piena, which is where he passed away when he was fleeing the French army, in 1812. No, in 18, yeah, what was it? Yeah, in the winter of 1812. And he arrived at this place. He fell ill over there. Tzemach Tzedek, who was with him, said, I asked my grandfather a question. Said that How can it be that Shabbos, there is a mitzvah to delight in the food? We learned the whole time that the physical properties and the physical pleasures of the food is unholy. And the holiness of it is just its energy, which is not the physical pleasure of it. It's more the spiritual side of the food. So how can it be that Shabbos, it's a mitzvah to delight? So my grandfather answered me that on Shabbos, even the physical part of the food becomes holy. So something like that. So the Tzemach Tzedek said, I don't understand. Everything in the physical world is a mix of good and bad, and it's the same physical food. In other words, the Alter Rebbe said that on Shabbos, physical pleasure is also godly. So he asked his father, but I understand. You're eating the same food. Yesterday you said that in this food there's certain toxicity, there's certain impurity in there, there's impure elements there. And the food doesn't change. It's the same apple, same piece of chicken, same piece of fish, same pasta. That yesterday was not holy, had within it elements that are part of the impure, and that didn't change. There's no surgery in the pasta. It's the same thing. So what happens? How can you say it's holy? So the Alter Rebbe answered me. He says that right before Shabbos begins, Hashem chases the klipa, the three impure klipos, which they have certain territory that they in klipas noga. Klipas noga is this klipa that is the intermediate klipa that has mixed the good and bad, and is dominating over a major part of this world, is receiving its vitality through this klipa. That means, and therefore everything in this world is, we said, all kosher things in this world is from the klipas noga. So let's say a cow, it's deriving its energy from the klipas noga, regarding even its physical existence. And in the meat of the cow, there is a mixture of the good and the bad, as we said earlier. So there is a higher element of it, which is even in the weekday potentially good, it's just that we have to activate it and acknowledge it, recognize it, draw it out. And there is the impurity of it, which is its lowly side. That happens, that's during the week. What happens is right by Shabbos begins, God's presence expands enormously. And when that happens, or what we call aliyas ha'olamos, God elevates all the worlds closer to him. So everything gets invited into what was outside, gets brought inside. And what happens with the dark germs that are there at the lower end of Noga? There is the impurity of it. What's there? What happens to that? They fall down below the world. In other words, these germs, let's call it spiritual germs, that were infecting the material meat before Shabbos, they get scared. It says actually there is this whip, the fiery whip, the Zohar says, that happens on Erev Shabbos, which is a flame of fire that causes the really dark forces to run. It's like they get chased away. So what happens? There is actually a change in the makeup of all physicality on Shabbos, because minutes before Shabbos, these impurities run away. Where do they go? They go to a place below and lower than our physical universe. What that place is, I don't want to ever visit that. We don't know, like this dark place. It's like the dregs fall down there, not forever. They're temporarily suspended to that space till after Shabbos. And then when Shabbos ends, they rise back up and take up positions that they were exactly before Shabbos. So they go exactly back to where they were before Shabbos, but for the 24 hours, they descend lower. And that means that the material elements of this world are not within the Klipa zone. What that means that even the more material side of it, even the physical pleasure of it, is now, could be now, just experiencing it and doing it, because you have to do it. You have to say, this is Shabbos. So I'm eating this to fulfill the mitzvah of delighting Shabbos. And that physical sensation is now in the realm of holiness. Gewaldig. It actually says that the reason, the Arizal says, you're supposed to take a hot shower before Shabbos, because in that hot heat shower, the heat is enclosed, that fire, and it washes off the germs of the physical body of a person as well. The dark elements of Noga from our body gets also, through that heat, falls away from our body. Our body becomes upgraded, and all physical material things in this world become upgraded, and they're all included in holiness. The impurities fall. That does not make, but it only applies to that which is kosher and permitted. It only affects klipas noga. It doesn't affect the 3 impure klipot. You can't say that on Shabbos I'm going to eat a piece of ham and make it holy. You can't do that because that doesn't change. But those things, all permissible things that belong to the noga, that the lower element of it that is the ra of noga, the negative noga, the impurities of it fall down, and that which was yesterday the ra of noga is no more ra of noga, is no more the bad of noga. It's already absorbable in holiness. As he says, and therefore it's not considered a physical pleasure, it's considered a divine pleasure, because God has reached and has integrated that too into the divine experience. And this is the idea of a conversion. Which the territory that was bad yesterday becomes converted to good. And that very same pleasure that yesterday would have been considered an impure, ungodly experience, now is converted to a godly experience. For behold, he explains, usually during the weekday, the way in which we do a birur, a rectification, a surgical experience with all food, as we discussed in yesterday's class, when do we need to push away the physical pleasures and delights of food? We discussed yesterday, and ignore them to the best of our abilities. That's when the evil is still taking hold, the dark elements of the 3 impure klipas, as they're infiltrating into noga, which means that the lower part of noga, which is ra. Well, let's not say it's the 3 impure klipas. Let's just say it's the ra of noga, but it's still the ra. It's still bad of noga. So when that ra is still in existence, what does that mean? What that makes is, when the negativity of noga is still present, that makes that when one enjoys it on a very physical basis with physical enjoyments, it's a physical lust. It has no divine content. So then, even though you can't say you mamish sinned, but it coarsens a person, as we said earlier, and it makes you less prone, it desensitizes the person to holiness, and it sensitizes the person to impure things. So it's very likely, after a full stomach, as we mentioned yesterday, that one will experience non-kosher desires, which they would not have had they not stuffed themselves with food. So you have to push it off. You have to reject it, and you shouldn't find pleasure in it. This is called subduing. You push it away. One subdues. You subdue the evil that's in it. But when there is that higher level called transformation, where the evil itself gets converted to good. What does that mean? That in the pleasure, it's not a physical lust. That physical sensation is itself a tainug elokei, is a godly pleasure, because the general state of a person, you say, what do you mean? Yesterday, this very lust was unholy, and now it's not lusted. What is that? You're still enjoying the food. The answer is, the person as a whole is in a much godlier conscious state. And therefore, even a physical sensation is experienced as part of your attachment to Hashem. Because is a divine experience. The evil became converted to holiness. And this is the primary difference between the service of the weekday, to the service of Shabbos. You do it as known. Because the dynamic of existence changes, and therefore the service changes. You're in a different zone on Shabbos than you are during the week. The world is a different zone. And obviously the work will change. It's a different environment. Like if you're in the desert, you have to behave in a way that is, you have to adapt to the desert to survive. And when you're in a beautiful, lush garden, you don't need the precautions of the desert. You can behave differently to survive. So the same is also spiritually. On Shabbos, we're in an oasis. The world itself becomes an oasis. The very same place, the very physical world, becomes a divine oasis. During the week, it's a desert. And therefore, it's a whole different, you're in a different space. Then you do it as known. The Sheishes Yemei HaChoil. He's now going to explain the source for this. It's because the spiritual source for this, that this idea that the world, the dynamic of existence changes, because in the 6 days of the week, these are the 6 days of the Ze'er Anpin, which means the spiritual vitality and source that make up Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday are the 6 emotions of God. That's what God is investing to create. Sunday, he's investing his kindness. Monday, he's investing his might. Tuesday, he's investing his beauty. Wednesday, he's investing his eternity or his perseverance, his victory element. And on Thursday, he's investing and interacting with the world through his glory. And Friday, he's interacting through his bonding element, his foundation element. As it is known, as it is known, when the verse doesn't say in 6 days God creates, it says 6 days God made. What's this? What does this mean? 6 days God made in the 6 days, in the time frame of 6 days, God created heaven and earth. No, but it doesn't say that. It says 6 days God made. The answer is the 6 days, which are the 6 emotions, they themselves are the energy of the universe during the 6 days of creation. Okay, but these emotions, remember we learned in the earlier classes that emotions need to be informed by the intellect. What's powering God's emotions? He's feeling kind. Why is he feeling kind? He has some kind of a reasoning that is generating that kindness. So that reasoning, that is the mochen, that is the backbone of the emotions, the life blood of the emotions. And the mochen, the mind element of the weekday, and mochen the ema, they're coming from the mother element, which is bina, which means bina, the understanding, is God's understanding, intelligence is informing his emotions. Just like in a human being, our intelligence informs our emotions, our understanding. Now, but what did we learn earlier? That Bina, even in the divine realm of Bina, Bina is already a external experience of the divine. You're not experiencing the essence of something in Bina. You're experiencing all the property. You're understanding the properties of something. You're not seeing its true substance of what it is. Like we discussed earlier, that a lot of times, on paper you read about, you're getting someone's portfolio. What is it called when someone gives their they write a for a profile, for a shidduch profile. You can read all about the person. It's a whole different story when you meet them. Because when you're reading about them, even when they're describing themselves, they're describing their properties, the about them, not the them. The them you can only see when you look at the person. You see the person. So the same as with the divine. In Bina, only the properties of the Ein Sof are revealed, but not the substance of the Ein Sof. So in this whole system of existence, what is the world's receiving? It's receiving divine's emotions, which divine's emotions are informed by the divine intelligence, which divine intelligence is only looking up to the Ein Sof and knowing its properties, but not knowing its essence. Which means that by the time this creation evolves into the material physical world, which is the lowest form, the godly presence, the divine consciousness that is possible for creatures living in the physical world is to a certain degree very limited, because even on the very, very beginning of existence, on the divine art, there's already concealment there. You're not experiencing God's truth. It's already unveiled with the veil of it's a description of Hashem, it's not him. We can understand how difficult it is down here to know the divine and to experience the divine, especially that God is everything. And as a result of that, our experience are so distorted that we have to be very cautious. And the moment that we can only elevate, we have to do a very selective elevation in our engagement with the material. And getting ourselves into the physical pleasure is going to completely stamp out this higher consciousness. It's only the existence of the divine. And therefore, in other words, meaning what we said earlier, we have to go to the gym, and over there we get spiritually fit. What's the gym? We said is during our prayer service, and we increase our godly consciousness. But what are we working with? We're working with our bina of our soul. The chachma of our neshama, which means the higher true vision of God, is not accessible. It's shut down during the week. So we're working with our hands tied behind our back. So when our experience of the divine is limited, even when we're praying, a lot of that is going to be lost when we enter the dining room, where 70% of what we've experienced during prayer is gone. We're left with 30% or 20% of that. And then you're putting me into a world of seduction, of delicious food and all that, which is speaking a different language, which doesn't express the oneness of God. It's claiming, it's presenting itself as godless. So for us to be able to end, so your person can't say, I'm not entering the food. I'm not going to the dining room. I'm going to stay only in the gym. I'm only staying in the shul. I'm only staying. Can't do that, because then you're not going to be able to fix God's world. He wants us to enter that. But we have to enter very carefully, and we have to see the potential and what elements of this food we can elevate. But if we'll allow ourselves into the pleasure, it's going to be so intoxicating. We're going to lose ourselves completely in it, and the negative of it is going to pull us in. We're going to lose sight of God completely. That's the reason for that caution. But on Shabbos, God opens up doors that we don't have during the week. And suddenly the experience of God is exponentially stronger and greater, because Chachma is Shabbos is a day where the mochen that flow into the divine emotions that creates the world are not coming from Bina, they're coming from Chachma. And that is an exponentially higher, deeper experience where we're actually coming face to face with the substance of God's truth. We seeing the mohus of Or Ein Sof. When you see that, then it becomes clear there's nothing but him. So then you can go back to a physical experience, and it is only God. The sensation I'm feeling, it's a delicious feeling that I'm getting from this kugel over here, and it feels delightful, but I'm conscious of this, that God is the substance of this pleasure. And I'm delighting in one of the ways that God manifests himself is in physical sensation. And it too is only him. But I'm not able to do that during the week. And that's the idea. As he says, during the week, I must subdue the unholy. But Shabbos, the Abba is the Mochen of Father. It's above the entire progressive order. It's the substance of Elokus. The service in this level, I'm able to turn over my very physical experiences to be holy. What does that mean? Suddenly everything is God. Even the material things, that the pleasure in it, is a pleasure, a divine pleasure. It's like it says in Mishlei, that it's tzaddik in Proverbs, that it's tzaddik eats to satiate his soul. What that means is that even when he's eating physical foods, he's experiencing the divine in it, nothing physical in it. Because to the tzaddik who has super godly consciousness, even during the weekday, a tzaddik is able to live in that consciousness that God is the pleasure of everything. This idea of tzaddik nafshay, maybe we'll explain it a little better in next class, because the end of the pasuk was ubetan rishayim techsar. Doesn't bring the second half, which is the stomach of the wicked is lacking. We will see how that plays into all of it. It's the two types of eating, Shabbos and during the weekday eating. Okay, let's leave it over here. And after this, he's going to go into explain what a vow means. And then we'll understand what an undoing of a vow is, as we shall see. And basically the idea is that when a person takes a vow, one is in the consciousness of Bina. But when you undo a vow, one is plugging the level of Chachma, and therefore gives a person far more access, ability to deal with the world, and therefore you don't have to keep the vow. We can remove the vow. Okay, let's see that as Hashem in the final class of this 10th discourse in the next class. Let Mashiach be here.